All right, today I am joined by Ben Shapiro from the Daily Wire to go through some of the biggest stories in the news. Ben, thank you so much for joining me.
And thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So lots going on. I want to jump into a major topic with you, something that you and those that you work with cover regularly. For those that don't know Ben Shapiro, I'm sure that's hard at this point, but he's the host of the Ben Shapiro Show. He is the co-founder of Daily Wire. He is an author and also a speaker. So many years ago, you wrote a book about how to debate the left. Now we've had this horrific shooting last week at this Catholic school, 2 children dead, 17 others injured. Yet CNN, MSNBC, most left-leaning media, they spent most of their time coddling transgenders, making sure that pronouns were pronounced correctly, saying that this isn't just mental illness, that this wasn't an attack on Catholic children. What are your thoughts on this? I don't understand the thinking of the left at all.
Well, I mean, when it comes to shootings, there's a very easy rubric that the left likes to use. If the source of the shooting is purportedly right-wing, then it's about the ideology, maybe about free speech itself. If it comes from presumably the left wing, then it's the guns. Always and forever, it's the guns. And so, again, that is the ideological differentiator for the left on this particular one. The media obviously very much reflective of that. But it is sort of astonishing, I think, this time that the facts actually came out, because we've seen many times in the past where they didn't. And I think the difference this time is twofold. One, this particular shooter happened to upload an enormous amount of material onto the internet, and then internet sleuths were able to download it before it was deleted, which meant that we actually got an honest look into this very quickly. And number two, the Trump administration is not trying to hide the ball on this. If this had happened under Joe Biden, then we would have had full-scale FBI explanations that it had nothing to do with ideology, it had nothing to do with transgenderism, it had nothing to do with mental illness, it had everything to do with guns and the intransigence of Republicans. So it's unfortunate that shootings become incredibly politicized, but that is the world that we've lived in for decades at this point.
Yeah. I noticed Senator Chuck Schumer immediately jumped on semi-automatic weapons. You had the mayor there saying, we need to get rid of guns that can hold 30 rounds of ammunition. These are not the type of weapons that were really used in this particular. So is this just anytime there's a tragedy, this is one of their last talking points that they try to push on the American people to take away our Second Amendment rights?
I think that's right. I think that the common and obvious move is that you say that there will be some sort of gun law that would have prevented this. And then the minute you examine the gun law, you realize it wouldn't have prevented it at all. But the idea is that if you make a proposal and the Republicans reject that proposal, or gun owners reject that proposal, now they're the bad guy. Now they're the people who get the blame. And so this has been, unfortunately, a very common strategy of the left, is to throw out policies that literally have nothing to do with the actual shooting at hand, and then claim that if you refuse to engage on the policies that they prefer, then it's because you don't care enough about dead kids. And there's a debate that I had with Piers Morgan, now it must have been 12 years ago, on CNN, back when he had a show on CNN, and he was doing the same thing then. The basic idea, again, from him, was that any gun control that he proposed, if I opposed it, it must be because of a lack of empathy or sympathy for the dead. The reality is that there are things that could have been done to prevent this particular shooting. One of those things might have been screening for mental illness before selling people a gun might be a good thing. And mental illness, in this definition, should include things like gender identity disorder, gender dysphoria, the sort of activities in which this person was obviously participating. But there are also real questions to be asked about generalized treatment of people who have gender dysphoria, and whether that is benefiting them, whether it's benefiting the people around them, and why we have a system that is actually geared toward glorifying this mental condition rather than attempting to alleviate it in a responsible way. Because this is not the first transgender shooter at a Catholic school that we've had, or a Christian school that we've had. There's one back in 2023, obviously in Tennessee, in Nashville, the Covenant shooting, which was performed, again, by a transgender identifying person. And we've had a spate of other violent incidents, including a STEM school in California. We've had burning of a Tesla store. We've had an attack on an ICE facility in Portland from people who are suffering from gender identity disorder or identify as transgender. And so you do have to start asking, whether there is something inherent to an ideology that suggests that if you deny the lie that somebody is male and actually is a female, if you say that's not true, that amounts to erasure. And that erasure means that you now have the right to attack the person who's doing the erasing of you. There is something in the ideology here that is indicative or moves people can move people toward violence.
Okay. What, I'm a practicing Christian. You're a practicing Jew. Monotheism teaches us a lot about prayer, trying to connect with the divine. I was shocked at how much the left-leaning media was excoriating parents for wanting to be prayerful, have a vigil, use their religious faith to mourn the loss of these children. Is this more about the left being godless, or is this about, as Dennis Prager describes it, struggling with understanding evil in this world when there's an omnipotent God that could have solved every problem for us?
Well, I mean, I do think that there is a definite misunderstanding of God, but I think there's really two things that are going on, and they're happening simultaneously. One is a complete misunderstanding of what people are doing when they are praying. There is this idea that it's an almost childlike idea that what prayer is designed to do is sort of change God's mind, that if you pray hard enough, then God is going to do what you want, which is not what prayer is for. God is not a gumdrop a machine. You don't put in your quarter and you get out exactly what you want. That's not how it works. And so there is this sort of basic idea that you keep hearing on the left. Well, if your prayers worked, then God would have prevented all of this. Like, well, no, that's just the problem of theodicy. And everybody who is religious has been dealing with this problem for several thousand years at this point. So I think that's a complete misinterpretation of what prayer is for. Prayer is for uplifting the people who are suffering, the parents of the kids who are wounded, the kids who are indeed wounded, the parents of the kids who have been killed, the entire community. It's for providing solidarity. It is for, I think, from a very spiritual perspective, putting your plea before God, that God actually will treat people in the way that you would like to see them be treated, but you're not God. And so God's plan may not identify with your plan. What I have always thought of prayer more as, the Hebrew to pray is lehitpalel, which is a reflexive term, meaning that it's supposed to change you. It's not supposed to change God. It's really to change your orientation toward the way that God is, so that you're more in line with him, not so that he should be more in line with you. But I think that for people who don't really understand prayer, they think, again, that what it is some sort of magical incantation. It's like a Harry Potter spell, and we believe that when you say the magic words, then God does exactly what you want. So I think there's a misunderstanding that's happening on one level. On the other hand, I think that what it is an attempt to basically create a false dichotomy. And that is, well, all you religious people, you just don't want to do the thing I want you to do because you're using prayer as an excuse. That actually you are in favor of kids being killed, but you're saying that you're doing something through prayer, and that's kind of your get out of jail free card. And that really is despicable. I mean, first of all, the idea that people who pray are not active in the world, are not trying to effectuate change in the world or make the world a better place, that's just a lie. I mean, that cuts against legitimately all of Christian history, all of Jewish history. It makes no sense at all. But I think it makes a little more sense from this perspective if you believe that the state actually is God. If you believe the state is the thing that makes all things possible, all good springs from the state, all evil is prevented by the state, then I think the real complaint is that you're directing your prayer in the wrong direction, where you really, they think, ought to be directing your prayers are at the great God that is government to prevent all bad things from happening. And if only you granted your total fealty to the government would solve all your problems.
Yeah. I find it interesting that some of the most outspoken Democrats mocking people for prayer or our thoughts are with you. These were the same people that when Trump was shot at said prayers for the Trump family, so like to me, those were just fake tweets on Twitter, so it's like, oh, the guy we hate that we say is equivalent to Hitler. Oh, he's just been shot at. Oh, I better say something like our prayers are with you. But then we have actual murdered children and they say, F your prayers, F your God, government's got to do. It's just, it's such a hypocrisy.
Yeah, they definitely have unmasked themselves. You can't say that prayer is meaningless, but also prayer is for you. That's not the way that it works.
Yeah. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. So the lieutenant governor of Minnesota gave a speech last week about the tragedy and was telling citizens not to blame the trans community, even though this trans boy regretted, his words, not mine, transitioning and being brainwashed. While she was giving this speech, she was wearing this T-shirt where literally protect trans kids, and then the symbol is a knife and a rose. I guess I'm a little bit caught off guard by this. It almost reminds me of Islam, where they're the religion of peace, and yet, many of their symbols or their flags are a sword. I don't know. Seems like false advertising to me.
Well, that is for sure the case. I mean, when it comes to the sort of protect trans kids movement, the basic idea is that an aggressive thing that they are doing is actually a defensive thing. So when they say that they should be able to take your kids away and transition them, and in the state of Minnesota, that's an actual real thing. In the state of Minnesota, they've declared themselves a trans refuge state, which means that if you are in the state and you do not approve your child's gender transition, there is a solid possibility the state comes and takes your kid away from you. They've banned what they call conversion therapy, but when they say conversion therapy, they don't mean what most people think conversion therapy was in like 1970, electroshocking kids who expressed gay feelings. What they're talking about is gender identity. So if you go to a child psychologist and you say, my kid is a boy, he believes he's a girl, and the child psychologist says, well, son, you're not a girl. Let's learn to deal with your gender confusion and how we act in the world. That is a form, according to Minnesota state law, under Minnesota state law, you can be prosecuted for that. That is a form of conversion therapy. And so that is an incredibly aggressive stance to take with regard to traditional biology itself, traditional gender mores, and all the rest. And yet it is posed as a defense of children. And so the idea is that in defense of the children, we are going to pick up this knife. Well, the problem is that if you perceive the entire world, including biology itself, to be an attack on your reality, then that's going to make you pretty aggressive. And that doesn't mean that everyone who's trans can go do violent things. But this is a point that I've made about rhetoric before. Now, there's certain kinds of rhetoric that obviously are to blame for actual activity. If I say to somebody, go kill this person, and then I give them a plan to go kill the person, that's rhetoric, but that's also illegal. That's incitement to violence. That could be conspiracy. What we are doing when you see things like this, protect trans kids with a knife, what you're doing is you're raising the temperature. You're raising the temperature on a pot of water. And when that pot of water starts to boil, then some of those bubbles are going to burst out over the side of the pot. And those tend to be the people who are more unstable, the people who have violent tendencies. And so the temperature actually does matter. In a lower temperature environment, then the mentally ill, the people who are deranged, they'll still happen, but they'll be more rare. But if you jack up the temperature for everybody, you're going to get more of that. The marginal violence is going to increase.
Did you know a dangerous amount of microplastics are now being found in our water, food, bloodstream, even our brains? These tiny plastic particles, often invisible to the naked eye, carry toxic chemicals like BPA that disrupt hormones, damage DNA, and inflame our organs. They affect everything from metabolism to fertility, and have even been linked to cancer, neurological disorders, autoimmune disease, and developmental issues in children. The worst part, there's no way to avoid exposure. It's everywhere. But there is a way to fight back, and it starts in your gut. Your gut is your first line of defense. A healthy microbiome can bind to and break down microplastic toxins before they poison your cells. But if your own gut is compromised, those toxins sneak right through, wreaking havoc on your immune system, energy levels, digestion, skin, even your brain. That's why we're healing our guts through kimchi. Now, kimchi restores the gut flora in your gut. Because in a world full of plastic, your gut needs to be bulletproof. Today, you can get an exclusive offer by clicking on the link below, or you can use code Gardner to get 25% off your order. For an even better deal, call my friends at Brightcore right now to get up to 50% off your order and free shipping. This stuff is great. It's been awesome for my gut, my bowels, my digestion, bowel movements. It's been awesome. And why save 25% when you can save up to 50% and get free shipping? Again, give them a call at 888-908-4425. All right, that's a good analogy. We saw that earlier this year when all of a sudden everybody decided to hate Elon Musk for exposing USAID and their corruption and eliminating employees at the government or programs that are supposedly good, but really they're just a shell company to receive a high salary. And then suddenly you see all these people attacking Teslas, that boiling over. So that's a good example. I wanted to react to a clip with you. This is over on Fox News, where they're talking about how they've discovered that the teachers' unions used $43 million of taxpayer money to fund far left agenda ideas. Let's watch this and then we'll react to it.
The teachers' unions have dumped more than $43 million into far left causes. AFT and NEA, total $14 million for one, $28 million for the NEA, to truly left-wing causes. I thought that these people were about teaching children.
No, I mean, education has nothing to do with their ambitions and goals and anything that they think about. It's all about, again, it's power. And they got all this money, disgustingly, during COVID. I mean, there was nothing more disgusting than Randy Weingarten holding the poor children to ransom by refusing to open the schools or reopen the schools unless the teacher unions got bucket loads of money. And of course, they didn't use that money to enhance education and make life better for students and teachers. They used it for all kinds of left-wing causes like gender-affirming care, as they call surgical and chemical castration of children.
All right. Do you think that this has been going on for a long time, where the GOP has just kind of been going with the status quo, but the left has been just pumping money everywhere they can in order to spread their ideology?
And there's no question. And when it comes to the teachers' unions in particular, the most corrupt bargain in American politics is the deal that exists between the teachers' unions and Democratic legislators. In blue states in particular, the NEA and the AFT, they rule the roost. If you want to teach in a public school, you have to be a member of one or the other. Your union dues, until recent Supreme Court decisions, were forcibly taken from you. Those union dues were actually collected by the government on behalf of the unions. The unions would then negotiate with the state legislators and the overseeing bodies and the governors of these various states for their own salaries. So they basically take money from their constituents, and they were paid by the state, right? Their constituents are paid by the state. And so their constituents are the teachers. They would take that money from the teachers. They would then use it to elect a bunch of Democrats, and then they would negotiate with those Democrats for how much they ought to be paid, and they would use that money to pour back into the campaigns of these various politicians. I mean, just openly corrupt stuff that's been going on for decades on end. It's why the right to work movement is so important, particularly in the educational sphere. And red states have been embracing that more and more. It's why school vouchers are really, really important. But yes, I mean, the educational system, the public education system in the United States, and this is true in red states as well, because these are national organizations, has been completely perverted by these teachers' unions that have no interest in the kids. That's not to say teachers don't have interest in kids. They do. Teachers' unions are not acting on behalf of children. They're not children's unions. They are teachers' unions. And that means that they are bargaining against the state and against the taxpayer and against the kids in order to achieve, at the best, higher pay, at the worst, indoctrinative centers in which they can promote their own ideological agenda.
Okay. Let me switch gears with you for the upcoming midterms. I know we're still a little bit out, but I keep seeing people on the right saying, you know, we could lose to the Democrats. We could lose the majority. It would make Trump a lame duck president. From my perspective, I mean, I know that history says that they switch, halfway through, but they've got very little money. They've got no good leadership. They've got terrible ideas. They're wildly unpopular. Your thoughts, is the GOP really in danger of losing the majority, or should we just, while they're down, just, push forward with our ideas? Your thoughts on whether we might lose the majority in 2026? Well,
I think the Senate is pretty secure. The Senate map for Republicans looks pretty good right now. Democrats would have to have a gigantic wave, really, in order to win back the Senate. There are a couple of vulnerable Senate seats for Republicans. Tom Tillis' seat is coming open. That's a vulnerable seat, for example. There are a couple of other seats like Ohio where Sherrod Brown wants to run again. So you could see Democrats pick off a couple of seats. For them to win 4 would be very difficult. They'd have to basically win a surprise seat in, for example, Iowa. So I don't think the Democrats are capable of taking the Senate. I think at best they achieve a tie that's then broken by the vice president. When it comes to the House, that's a bit of a different matter. It's a very, very narrow majority. It's why you're seeing redistricting in Texas, because Republicans are saying, listen, we've been basically robbed by the last census of a bunch of electoral votes that we actually should have, a bunch of congressional seats we ought to have. And so we're going to redistrict. Democrats are retaliating, of course. But when you look at the enthusiasm numbers right now for voting, right now, Democratic enthusiasm numbers are very, very high. They're like 75% enthusiasm versus something like 52% enthusiasm for Republicans. That makes a big difference because off-year elections are base elections. And so if the Democratic base, this is typically very, very typical. The party in power, the voters tend to be more complacent. Okay, we're going to win, and they don't show up to the polls. So it's very important that Republicans get their enthusiasm up. It's not that Democrats are becoming more popular with independents. They absolutely are not. It really is more about how enthusiastic are Democrats to come out and try and put some sort of check on President Trump via the House. And so you've seen some early indicators that Democrats could get people out to vote. There was a state House race in Iowa, that a district that President Trump had won by, 13, 15 points, where a Democrat won last week. There's sort of these early bellwethers that look like Democrats theoretically could pick off a seat here or there. The problem is they don't have to pick up that many seats in order to pick up the House majority. The reason I say that is not because I'm trying to be a downer, but because I'm trying to say to conservatives and Republicans, get out and vote. I mean, Democrats are wildly unpopular, but complacency is the enemy of progress in this particular arena. And if Republicans get I'm old enough to remember when after 2004, George W. Bush wins re-election, he's got a majority in the House and the Senate, and Republicans thought, we're never losing again. I mean, he'd won an election in 2000. He then won a midterm election in 2002, and then he won again in 2004. And Republicans like, we're on an unbeatable run. By 2006, Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, and by 2008, Barack Obama was president. And I've seen it the other way, too. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when after the Barack Obama second term, there was a feeling among Democrats that they would never lose again. Hillary Clinton was going to be president. Democrats would dominate for the next 2 decades. And now we are 2 terms into President Trump. And so, things switch very quickly in politics, but the base being excited about voting, that is, I think, the single biggest thing that Republicans have to keep in mind.
All right. So it's our election to lose if we become complacent. Do you think this is why President Trump called for a national convention? He wants to use his PR and his momentum, his wins for everybody and just create this big momentum to get everybody out voting?
100%. One of the hardest things for a president, any president of any party, is to have coattails in an election where he's not on the ballot. So President Trump has coattails when he's at the top of the ballot and then you're voting Republican underneath him because you showed up to vote for Trump, you vote for a bunch of other people. And this is particularly true uniquely for President Trump, who is the first Republican candidate probably of my lifetime where the math has suggested that the non-voting population is more pro-Trump than the voting population, that if more people had voted, then he actually would have won by more in the last election cycle. So marginal voters tend toward President Trump. Regular voters tend more toward Democrats. Well, off-year elections are regular voter elections, not marginal voter elections. And so what he's trying to do is generate those coattails. He's trying to say to everybody who may be a marginal voter, listen, I'm not on the ballot, but you still really, really need to show up. It's smart politics. I think it's smart. It'll be interesting to see whether it's effective or not.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me, you've got a new book out, Lions and Scavengers. Tell me about that book.
Sure. So the basic premise of Lions and Scavengers is that in our civilization, in our country, and in every human heart, there's basically a lion and a scavenger that are battling for supremacy. The lions, those are the people who are duty-bound, who believe in building the society around them, who wish to build social fabric, innovate, go out, forge forth, make the society around them better. And then there are the scavengers who look at all of the institutions and systems of the society that has made them prosperous and seek to tear it down, seek to rip it apart. And that battle you can see on a civilizational level in the sort of agglomeration that you've seen between what I call in the book the barbarians, the looters, and the lechers. You see them marching in the streets of London in favor of Hamas, or you see them on college campuses, Queers for Palestine, or you see them in the Zohran Mamdani campaign, where you basically have a bunch of people who believe that America is uniquely evil and exploitative. Those would be the barbarians, people coming from the outside who are saying America is just awful, it's hurting everyone around the world. And then they unite with people who believe that the system is rigged and unfair and needs to be torn down to the ground on an economic level, and we need to just level everything. Those would be the looters. Then you have the lechers, the people who believe that all the traditional institutions of Western life, things like church and family, need to be torn down because they're patriarchal and harmful. Now, those groups don't live in sort of comfortable camaraderie with one another. There's a lot of internal conflict there. But the one thing they can agree on is that the lion needs to be torn down to the ground, that all the people who are trying to build up the social fabric, make the country stronger, adhere to its founding principles, all those people need to be torn down. And so that's the big battle on a civilizational level that is currently happening right now. It's ongoing. The history of the West is, the lions build, the scavengers try to tear down. If the lions go to sleep, which is, I think, what we've seen far too often over the course of my lifetime, then the scavengers can take the upper hand and really rip apart the civilization from the inside. And I think that the curative for that I talk about in the book is the individual. So the individual has to start by recognizing that this battle is within our own heart, right? That each of us have a drive toward building and innovating and being better and building social fabric and doing our duty as God sees our duty. And then there's a part of us that's envious. There's a part of us that wants to violate the 10th commandment and envies our neighbor and sees any success as a sign that we are being harmed, we are being screwed in some way, and that we need to tear down the system that allows for our neighbor to be more successful than we are. The Cain and Abel story, in other words, is eternal. That the speech that God gives to Cain at the beginning of Genesis, where he says, sin crouches at your door, but you can overcome it. That is a constant battle. Are we going to overcome that sin? Are we going to overcome the sin of envy? Or are we simply going to give way to it and then try to murder the more successful person, in that particular case, Abel? But for us, anyone who's more, blame the system, blame the person. And that battle is very much hot. It is an ongoing battle. I think that many of the stories we've talked about are indicative of that battle, ranging from the school shooting to the AFT. I think that these forces are at war for whether the civilization survives as it has been built.
Okay. Yeah. My children went to a charter school, and every day they would ask them, are you a builder or a wrecker? And I love that. It was real simplistic, but to this day, I'll still say to my kids sometimes, like, are you being a builder or a wrecker? Like, I hear you gossiping about your friends, or you're just complaining about this. Like, be somebody that goes out and does something and contributes to your community. Final question for you, Ben. I appreciate you coming on. What do you make of President Trump's big push to get Americans achieving excellence back into blue collar jobs, pushing for manufacturing, versus when I went to school, there was a lot of pressure to go get a college degree. It cost like $100,000. And when I came out of business school on my last day, they said, you can probably make about $35,000 a year. And I thought, why did I go to college? Like, why did I, now this was 16 years ago, but your thoughts on this big push for excellence and into these more hands-on jobs?
Well, I think that one of the beautiful things about capitalism is that there is specialization, there is comparative advantage. And so we need people who are business people, innovators, STEM majors, and then we need people who are doing work with their hands. We need a lot of different types of people. And I think the one size fits all that's been promoted for decades, which is everybody goes to college, everybody gets a degree, many of those degrees are useless, and then you get some sort of white collar job. That's not for everybody. And I think that the president putting focus on the fact that there are an enormous number of jobs that are currently open that are blue collar jobs, pipe fitting in North Dakota. Those are very real jobs. There aren't enough people applying for them. I think the president is right about that. I think where the president is most right of all is that the president have said we have to value what he calls our geniuses, but we have to value the power of innovators. We have to value the willingness of people who are willing to take risks and go out and build things. And I think the president is very much on the side of the lions in that respect.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to put a direct link to Lions and Scavengers down below. I hope it's wildly successful. If people want to catch your show or follow you online, what links can I put down below?
They can certainly obviously go to Amazon for the book or to our website, dailywire.com. If you become a subscriber at dailywire.com, you obviously get the show, but you can get the show also at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.